Hello there. Right, we're just going to jump straight into this. And it's being recorded locally again, so if the connection, which I suspect is going to be an issue again today, if it is an issue, there will be a proper version uploaded to YouTube later on today, which can be viewed at your own leisure, or at leisure, depending on where you are in the world. So welcome to day 5 of Creator Mass 2019, where we make a set of, well, not a set of, where we make some IMVU, not IMVU or IMVU, it's IMVU items using Blender 2.8, well, this is 2.81, but Blender 2.8 series. And yesterday we made a rosette. So we made this rosette yesterday for the, oh no, it's got no body. Where's the body gone? So yesterday we made this. It started out as, is it number 2? It's number 2. So this is what we modeled in Blender. So this started from a clean file, and we used the default scene cube, this thingamajig. We deleted a couple of sides from it to give us this C shape. Oh, I've forgotten to zoom it again. Handy little thing. So that gives us this C shape that we can then add some loop cuts to. So we had a loop cut down the center and then across, and that gives us a bit more structure to play around with that we can use to shape the mesh into a ribbon, a bent ribbon, and then we can duplicate that and do all sorts of things to it and end up with, don't save, and oh, did we put I just noticed, oh no, we fixed that. That's fine. So you end up with something like this. So you duplicate that C shape. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. We've got a central box that's just made a little rounder by adding a few loop cuts. And then we added 2 planes to give us the ribbon strips that hang off the bottom. So if you watch the stream from yesterday, hang on, let me see if I can find it. I'll drop a link in the chatola. Copy, paste. So you can see all the videos for this from yesterday at that link. So we got this rosette. We made it relative to Blender, so it's not positioned where it needs to be, and then we appended that into the starter file to give us this rosette, which is at the torso's, well, top of the torso, the chest, and then we just modified it a little bit so that the rosette is subject to gravity. So if we imported this, if we use this straight as it was from Blender, these bottom ribbon strips that are hanging down would be sticking out. So we've just done a bit more editing and had them drop to follow gravity. So yesterday, once we did this, what we thought would be nice is using some of the things that we've done previously. So no, so I have to go into, so we'll use some of the things we've done previously. So for one, we've got some vertex painting. Let's switch to vertex painting to see this. Can't quite see it in this, but there is some vertex painting there. So what we've done is we've artificially shaded using black or tones of grey. We've artificially shaded the mesh. So what we can do today is use some vertex painting and also making the object two-sided so that we can, whoops, so we can have a different texture on the inside as from the outside. So that's what we'll do today. And we don't need to use the original file. We can use the file that we've got now that we've got this in place as an accessory that's linked to the spine bone, spine 04. So what we're going to do then, select our mesh, and we're going to duplicate this, and we just want a standard duplicate or standard duplication, duplicate object. So press escape just to reset that. And before we do anything, what we need to do is material properties. And we need to disable backface culling so the mesh turns one-sided only. And we use this because we want to check to make sure that the faces are pointing in the right direction. So we want the outer mesh, the original one, to point outwards. We want the duplicates to point inwards. So what we can do there then is select the duplicate mesh, so we can use the outliner to do that. Because selecting objects in Blender 2.8 is a little tricky sometimes. So if that's a problem, just use the outliner. Select the item, so that's just click it. And then for this we want to go into edit mode, select all, and then from the mesh menu, mesh, normals, and then flip. So normals and then flip, and that will invert the faces so they point inwards. So we've now basically got a two-sided mesh object. So what we can do now, object mode, we want to assign a complete, do we want a complete, yes, so we want a completely different material on the inside than we do on the outside. So whilst our inside object is still selected, material properties, and our ribbon material has two users. So that basically means the user is essentially data, whether it's an object or it's another type of object in Blender, whether that is using a particular reference. In this instance it's a material reference, so we've got two of those. We want that to be one, so we can click on that button and it'll make that unique, which we can then rename 1. And that's our IMVU compliant compatible material names. So we've got a material that's unique, so we now have 2. So 0 and 1. So shading editor, or the shading workspace, which will be, need to zoom out of. Make sure that we have the appropriate material selected, so material properties, and we have, so in the same way that we had two objects using one material, we've also got 2 objects using one texture, and that's indicated again by the user number, and that's 2. So we can click on that to make this unique as well. So what we're basically doing is creating a unique material and a unique image reference. So that then means we have 2 completely separate materials and 2 separate images. So if we click on this, it'll make the name unique. We can see that a little better in the heading, png.001. But what we can do now, click on the file icon, and load in another image that we can use. Let's go with red for now. So click the, select the item, open image, and it appears on the ribbon. Just focus on that frame selected. Whoops, oh, we have to reset the view. So for that, sidebar, which is the view properties from previous versions, view, just add a 0 to that, and change that to 1. Press the N key. So that is our ribbon, 2-sided. So we've got one side as purple and the other side as red. So let's go back to, let's double check. Yeah, that's fine. So yes, so we have 2 materials and 2 images, and that allows us to apply one material to one object and the other material to the other object. So let's go back to layout. And because we've duplicated the main mesh, it's also using the UV map. So although we've actually just used, just open these in image editor. Accessories, Blender. Right, so where is it? Right, so although the primary texture is this, so that is 512 so it's 512 by 64 pixels. So that's the primary. Secondary is, where is it? What scaling is that? Let's do that at 200. Let's do that at 200. So they're both the same scale. So we've got 512 by 64 and 256 by 64. Well, that might be 128. But because we've just used a plain texture, it'll map without any issues, being a smaller texture. But you could do a red version of the primary texture, 512 by 64, and that will map. In fact, let's try that. So red, so I want this to be 512 by 64. Center, middle. I want this to be red. Let's make it a little darker. Oh, that looks all right. Oops, that's the wrong one. Where's the other strip gone? So let's make these a slightly darker red. One 120. And the text, we want that. Right, so let's save that. Save as. Red. Export. That's okay. Let's make those. Oh, is that a group? That's a group. Okay, so we'll leave that for now then. So, although we've mapped a smaller image to that, if there were patterns, so if there was snowflakes on this, you'd get distortion. But we can use this one that we've just created. Go back into shading, browse, find the image that we just made. There it is. Whoops. That's to the outside. Oh, that looks quite nice actually. So get that one back. We want the other object. So there we go. Browse. Now select. Thank you. There we go. That's better. And we do need to flip the UV map. So if you did this, let's say that the material was made opaque, there was an opacity and you only had the text, you have to make sure that the UV map is flipped the right way around. Is that flipped the right way around? Yeah, that looks okay actually. So we don't need to do that. Yeah, so you'd have to watch out for that. If you wanted to make these, if you wanted to have opacity, you have to make sure that your UV maps are facing the right way relative to the front face. So you've got to make sure that the text, if the text is made opaque on one side, when you turn the thing around, or you can see the back side of it, the text is still orientated the right way around relative to the front face. So that's our texturing done. That looks quite nice actually. Layout. So let's save this file. Save as number 5. Oh, so this is day 5. Rosette 5. Actually, let's call this 1. Save. So what we can do now is a bit of vertex painting, because in IMVU the objects look a little flat. So the object looks a little flat because it's using IMVU's default lighting. So what we can do is use vertex painting to create artificial shading. So let's get rid of, or hide, so we can use the outliner for this. Click on the little eye icons, get rid of the back one, turn that around, and then enable vertex painting mode. So select our object, vertex paint, view, sidebar, tool, and then we have our palette. And for shading, we just want to use grayscale tones. And all we do is click on the vertices of a mesh. We're not clicking on the faces to color, because the color information is not held there, it's held at the vertex. So all we do is just paint over the vertex and shade the mesh. And you may find that you have to maneuver the object around so that you're not necessarily painting through another mesh element, because vertex colors will try to be painted on that element that you're trying to paint through. So this means getting used to using the manipulation tools for moving the scene around so that you can paint things. And that might mean getting right inside the mesh in order to see where a face or edge is exposed so it can be painted. That's one of the disadvantages of vertex painting and the way that Blender works. So what we're doing is painting in artificial or manually placed shading. And already we can see that the object's got a little bit more depth than it had. This can be a little time consuming, but it is worth it. Oh, and yesterday we discussed at some length why you want to be careful where your vertices are placed relative to the outside edge or the outside of a surface when you were using vertex painting, because the difference in distance changes the way that vertex colours appear on the mesh. So in this section here, this edge goes down a bit further and stops about here, but this edge doesn't, this leading edge of this bow. So if we assign the same vertex colour or vertex tint to this vertex, the length of this edge and the where they intersect means that we have two different tonal values at this point where they intersect, and it can look a bit jarring if you're not careful. So do have to be mindful the position of vertices on your meshes if you intend to use vertex painting. Right, so that looks okay. So object mode, and we lose the ability to see. So those are our vertex colors, and when we switch back to object mode they disappear, so we have to be mindful of that. So we now want to do the same thing to the inside of our object of the ribbon. So vertex paint, select the object and just start painting away. Happy little tonal colours. And keep in mind where lighting may fall and where objects are obscured, so that we create an impression of shading and shadow. And again, we have to watch out for being able to actually get to the vertex that we want to paint, because we can't paint through an object. which can be a bit of a pain. So this is the vertex painting equivalent of being a contortionist. Whoops. Almost there. And we can do the inside, although we're not very, probably not going to see this. And that's the inside done. So we lose this vertex. That's a shame, that. I'm sure there's probably a setting somewhere where you can enable vertex color display in the 3D view, but for now we lose the ability to see it when we switch back to object mode. So we do have our two objects painted. That looks a little harsh on the top there. Oops. Oh, it could just be the... Right, okay. Well, let's try exporting that and see what that does. So we want to save the file. File, save as, number 2. And then before we export, we need to double check something. So we've got to check that we have smoothing assigned to the mesh, which we do. So object, shade smooth, select the other object, shade smooth. We've got our materials set up, so we've got ribbon O and ribbon O1. And then what else do we need? Oh, vertex group. So we need to double check. Although we've duplicated the first mesh, just make sure that the vertex group is set up. So select the duplicate, object data properties, vertex group, want to be in edit mode, select all, and just double check that that group is assigned to everything. So select, deselect. That's the test, that works. Back into object mode. Let's just quickly save over the file we just created. And then the final step is to join the two meshes together. So we want to join the duplicate to the primary. So click, shift click in the outliner. Oops, that's the outliner. And then join the two together from the object menu. Object, join, and hopefully, no, have we done that? Did we do that? We may have missed a step. So select the duplicate, object, apply. We need to double check, and then rotation and scale. Object, apply, rotation and scale. That just makes sure that the mesh is pointing in the right direction. Right, now we can do it. So select, shift click select, and this will do this funny thing. Don't worry about that. And join, where's join? There's join. So we now have one mesh. If we exported this to FBX without doing this, without joining the meshes together, what we end up with are two separate mesh objects. That has its advantages in some circumstances, but for the most part, don't necessarily need to do it. So file, let's save this. Number 3. Now we can export. So deselect everything, none. And then from the file menu, export FBX. And as always for FBX export, for accessories in particular, selected objects is deselected. Everything else is okay. In geometry, we can leave apply modifiers. In armatures, always disable add leaf bones. And then because we're not using any animation, we can disable bake animation. And then just export. That's exported the file, so back in IMVU. So that's the original one. Create, new derivable, accessory, glasses, so that's the default with the shades, and then to bring in the file that we just created, FBX import, load FBX, and find the file 5.3, open. That gives us the set skeleton root dialog box, and we always select the one that starts with root node, and that will always be 2 bones and 1 mesh. So always select that. There is our mesh. Wonder why it's done that. I'll go back and check that in a second. Configure FBX. So this is a female accessory, so the mesh ID is always 2. We've got our 2 materials, and as we discussed in the previous previous stream, IMVU uses the numbers as the material identifier, not the name. So you can have the same name applied to all the materials. This might have 10, a dozen materials assigned, and they could all be ribbon. And as long as the numerical append is sequential, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way up to 12, or however many materials there are, IMVU will know that they are distinct materials. So that's okay. Scale always needs to be 0.01, and then import. we'll get this message warning saying that it's overriding the default, which is what we want. Import changes, apply changes, and there is our sunflower head, because that's the default bone attachment is head. So configure, and then we want to change the attachment node. That needs to be spine. It's this armature, so that's spine 04. Spine 04. And there is our two-sided rosette on the chest. So we then need to enable vertex colors. So it's disable two-sided, don't need use blending. Apply. And then we can enable vertex colors and vertex colors. And it just shades the mesh just a little bit so that we get something that's not quite as flat. And there is our two-sided rosette. So save that, save as Creator Mass 2019 5 Rosette. So let's go back and check something. So for some reason, this is incidental. Don't need to do this, but it's kept the name of the duplicate instead of. We don't need the point. We don't need the .001. So to change the name of that, in Object Properties, we can click that. Click in the ID field at the top there, and just delete that. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4. So we can save over that, and then we can re-export. So deselect everything, none. Export FBX. Select objects deselected. That's okay. That's okay. That's disabled. That's okay. So export FBX. Back into IMVU. Create a new one, just so that we can see the difference. Go. So we're going to import that re-export. So FBX import, load FBX, select the file 3, select root node, 2 bones, 1 mesh, and there it's brought in the mesh now. It's brought in the mesh as it should have been. Not quite sure why it kept the name of the duplicate and not the original, because we are joining. We joined the duplicate to the primary mesh. So what should have happened is the resulting single or unified object should have kept the name of the original mesh. So I'm not quite sure what was going on there, but it's easy to change. Configure. Materials are okay. 2 0.01. Import changes. Okay, and this doesn't change anything. It's just trying to find out where spine 04. You're constantly double checking where errors might be occurring, just in case a bigger issue crops up. So disable those two, enable that, enable that. And there is our mesh. So if you're wanting to do this for the male character, for the male avatar, ordinarily you might be able to depending on the product, ordinarily you might be able to just add the male ID, which is 191, to the compatible body pattern PID. So we've got two there. There's the female, which is 80, and 191, which is the male. So that means that when the product is published to the catalogue and made available, it's usable for both male and female avatar. But we can do that for these types of products because there is very little difference between the male and female avatar at this point in the avatar, so at the wrist, lower arms. But obviously for a female character, you can't really use this bow on a male character because this is positioned to take into account the difference between the female chest versus the male chest. So you would have to make another version of this bow that was specifically set up for the male avatar. So we could probably do that actually. And we may even be able to use this actual mesh. So we've got it saved as version 3, so remember that. So what we're going to do is load in the male accessory, which is here. So it's for, I've got these on the desktop, so it's just drag and drop. But if you had them loaded somewhere else or saved somewhere else, it's just open, browse to and select the file. So male accessory, drag and drop, open. So that's the male accessory, helper, dummy. So what we want to do now is append the file that we just created . Number 3. So when you are appending, blend files act like zip archives or archive files. They're containers. So we can double click on that and it accesses the internal data of the file. We want objects. And here we should have somewhere the Rosette. There it is, rosette.mesh. So select and then just append. And because we used the female avatar file, we don't have to do any of the rescaling that's often needed when we bring in standard Blender files. So what we can do now is do a little bit of positional tweaking to account for the male anatomy. Edit mode. We have to be a little careful here because we have two sets of meshes that we have to manipulate. See, so we have to be careful how we select. So let's switch to wireframe and we're going to use box select. Dagnabbit. Okay, so we're going to have to do it the hard way. So what we're doing there, because we've got coincidental meshes, not meshes, coincidental vertices. So clicking on this spot will select either or vertex. So if you want to select both of them, because we're in wireframe mode, we can select through the mesh. So we can hold shift down and select both vertexes. Hold shift, and if we click twice, we're going to be selecting both of them. And that allows us to select multiple elements so that we can manipulate them into shape. But you have to toggle between the different display modes, or you can enable transparent. Well, it's not transparent, it's toggle X-ray, and that allows you to do a similar thing. But always make sure that you are selecting both sets of vertexes. Because you don't want to pull the meshes apart. Whoops. Object. But as with the female avatar, try not to sit the mesh right on top of the avatar, because you've got to make allowance for clothing. But you do want to try and follow the shape of the avatar as best as you can, so that it looks as though it's being influenced by the avatar's body. So that looks okay. Right, so object mode. We can save this file, save as. Oh no, where's the, oh there it is. So this is number 4. Save as. And we don't need to do too much to this other than bringing the file in and setting it up for the male avatar. So what we need to do next before we do anything else is we need to double check it's going to be linked to the right skeleton. So spine 04. So if we select that armature, go into pose mode, we'll be able to check if it'll let us select the other bone. I have to change the display mode for this. Hang on. Viewport display. Oh, it should be displaying as. Where is that? Oh, let's try disabling X-ray. There we go. Duh. Why does it make the bones go wireframe? That is bizarre. Okay, so we'll test this. Pose mode. La 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 la. That doesn't work. Let's select the other bone. If it'll let us, there we go. Nope, that doesn't work. So, if you do import your female avatar mesh or female product into the male avatar and adjust it, you have to set up, or you have to re-establish the connection between the mesh and the armature that's going to be used to control it. So select your mesh, modifiers, deselect or clear that by clicking the X, click on the little eyedropper and then click on the armature that we're going to use and then test, pose mode. Whoops, there we go. So that's what we wanted happen. And we need to check that, as always, to make sure that A, this armature controls the mesh. Oh, there's 2 armatures there. Why are there 2 armatures there? Oh, I see. It brought in the dependencies. Oh, so we can get rid of that one. So select and then just press the delete key. Don't need that. So let's double check that again. Nope. Yep. Right, so yes, what we have to do, what we're doing there is double checking to see which armature is in control of the mesh, and to make sure that when the bones are manipulated, oh, for crying out loud. Well, this is being recorded again, so if the stream is disconnected. If the stream disconnects or the quality is all poopy, this is being streamed live, so not being streamed, it's being recorded live. So the upload will be later on today. They'll upload that. So back to what we were doing before Twitch rudely interrupted us. So what we're doing here is double checking that the armature controls the mesh and that a particular bone controls it, and that when the bone is manipulated, we're not leaving anything behind in terms of the mesh doesn't have any stray vertices that haven't been grouped as part of the vertex group, because what will sometimes happen is that if you've missed a vertex and you move the bone, a vertex will stretch right out of alignment. Which indicates that it's not being part of the vertex group. So that's what we're testing there. So we should be able to export this now. So let's just save a copy of this. Save as number 5. And then export. So select none. Export FBX. Same again. Selected objects deselected. Apply modifiers, that's optional, but we can leave that. Skeletons, always make sure, whoops, add leaf bones is disabled, and we can disable animation. Check the file name and then just export. So in IMVU, derive new product, male accessory, we get the Elvis glasses. So that's the default derivable for accessories, the Elvis glasses. And same procedure. So FBX import, load FBX, find the file, number 5, there it is. Open, get the same dialog, and again, root node, 2 bones or mesh. There is our mesh. Configure. Same again, materials, they've come in as expected. Now for male accessories, the mesh ID differs. For male accessories, it is 0. Don't ask why the difference. That is just the way it is. Apply scale 0.01. That's the same. So yeah. So always remember that male accessories, the mesh ID is 0. Female accessories, the ID is 2. So we can now import. Get the same warnings. We're overriding material, that's okay. Import changes. And then apply changes. And there is our way. Right in the mush. And again, config. We need to change the attachment node. That is spine 04. Apply changes, and there is our rosette on the torso. Meshes, we can check the texture assignments again, so we want our vertex colors. So disable the ones we don't need. We don't need two-sided anymore. When we do this, we don't need two-sided. And then just apply, and there is our final object. So save as, creator mess 2019 5 Rosette male. And there is our product. So we have a male and we have a female. So with these types of products, yeah, as we were saying, you would need to specifically cater to the avatar's structure. So you can't use the same mesh for both avatars, unlike you can with things like this, the wrist corsage, wrist ribbon. So there we go, 2 more new projects and 2 more new products. So upload. So we've got male and a female rosette, and we may be coming back to this one on the 23rd, loosely scheduled for the 23rd. We're going to do something with this and make it possibly a slightly risque product. Woohoo! So look out for that on the 23rd, and we'll do something with this, maybe even combining all the products that we've created so far. Where's the wrist ribbon? So maybe doing something with all of these ribbons and things, and doing something that's a little risque. So a bit of a short one today, because the internet connection's always been a bit poopy. So there we have, how many products have we made? So that's 5 now. So tomorrow we'll do something else with some bows. Not sure what yet, but that will be day 6 of Creator Mouse 2019. So until tomorrow, we'll call it quits there, and we will say cheerio, as they say in Charlie's Chocolate Factory.